please join me in welcoming Dr. Green as your keynote speaker this morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. So good morning, and thank you, Begum, for that wonderful introduction. Since 2012, when I started at Ryerson, I have had quite a few speaking engagements. And actually, my first keynote was for the 2014 graduating class of Nile Academy. I was happy to see the graduates with their family, friends, marking a major milestone. This Sunday morning, I'm very excited to be here with you today as you achieve a significant educational milestone. Subsequently, this occasion also marks my first convocation address to a university graduating class as vice president, and it feels great. It was only yesterday when I was in a similar situation to you, sitting with my peers, listening to a convocation speech, waiting for my name to be called, and correctly, I might add, and anxious to walk across the stage to receive my degree en route to the next leg of my life's journey. I know what you're really waiting for, so I promise that I will not take too long. But I do hope to leave with you a few things to think about after we've parted. When Begum offered me this opportunity to deliver a convocation address, I was certainly up for the challenge, and because it was Begum asking me, I could not say no. I was particularly pleased to be asked because this experience is pushing me outside of my own comfort zone. It is often through opportunities of pushing past our comfort zones that we grow as professionals and as people. But sometimes when you go through the journey, you realize that along the way, the path is made much easier because you find commonalities with others. As I prepared for this address, I realized that we might actually have a few things in common. At one point in my career, I was a professor, as you heard, and this was at the University of Nebraska. Yes, I was living in the Cornhusker State, no more so for football and the good life versus any form of racial diversity. However, it was an experience that not only informed me, but transformed me for the rest of my life. I was a faculty member in the Department of Educational Psychology, teaching for one of its nationally recognized programs called Quantitative, Qualitative, and Psychometric Methods, almost like a tongue twister there. I was recruited because of my scholarship using qualitative methodologies to examine experiences of diverse populations. However, one of my first teaching assignments did not fall in alignment with my expertise. My assignment was to teach multicultural counseling. I was not overly familiar with the subject matter, and I must be honest, I had some initial reservations about teaching the course. After consulting with a few colleagues and my husband, who gave me words of encouragement, I decided to go for it. My philosophy at the time was, and still is, have PhD, will teach. One of the first things I did to prepare for the course was review prior reading assignments, which included Dr. Daryl Wing Sue's book, Counseling the Culturally Diverse, Theory and Practice. It was through his scholarship that I first learned about the concept of cultural competence. I was so excited to discover how it leads to understanding other cultures as a way of understanding yourself. Cultural competence begins with self-awareness. It's about knowing your positionality, knowing your privilege, and the way you exercise your power. And it involves several steps. First, taking stock in yourself, taking a very hard look, sorting through who you are, how you got here, how do you interpret life. Consider how your interpretation of life may be different from others. Next, it is important to understand or learn to understand others. We have become a very self-absorbed society. When you think about social media and the way it works, it allows you to curate and read what you like or are interested in a matter of seconds. However, the world is not simply a place where you can learn it in a matter of seconds, or a place that's siloed, or a place where you're living alone. We live in a city that is praised for its diversity and inclusion. That's actually one of the reasons why I came to Toronto. And I was even told that racism did not exist here in the country of Canada. Who knew? But how often do we really take time to learn about others, their experiences, what they encounter, learning about people you meet on the street, people we work with? Some of us don't even know our neighbors beyond the polite pleasantries. Understanding others is a key part of cultural competence, and it is also a very strong part of what it means to operate in the health professions as psychotherapists and psychologists, clinicians, etc. Also, when thinking about this concept of cultural competence, it is not acceptable to only pay attention to what's in front of you. As people and future clinicians, it's important that you acquire an understanding that goes beyond your own predominant culture and preferences. The key is getting to know all the other influences, micro and macro, such as systems of power, oppression, and privilege, beliefs and philosophies that have created not just you, but the lived experiences of your clients also. To be inclusive practitioners, one needs to recognize your lived experiences and how they connect with your clients' cultural cues, learning their backgrounds, understanding their lived experiences. Think about how they see the world and how that worldview impacts the how and the way you see them. When speaking of systems, from a colonial perspective, Even this concept of cultural competence has come under scrutiny, as it gives an air of dominance or a sense of being an expert on a culture that is not one's own. Therefore, cultural fluency might be the better terminology. While cultural fluency speaks to being culturally aware, the analogy that I would use is that of learning a new language. With time, you are able to speak, then to write, then to read. From a beginner to an intermediate to an advanced learner, it becomes part of you, part of the way you think, continuing to learn more along the way. Fluency is the goal, but of course, if you don't use it, you lose it. And once you choose to be intentionally, culturally fluent, approaching your clients with this perspective, practicing from an inclusive lens will help you to begin to understand their worldviews, informing your relationships with them, how you serve them, and laying the foundation for a successful practice. During many of my speeches over the past couple of years, I've often shared the analogy that inclusion is not simply about being invited to the party. I don't know, some of you might be partying a little bit later on today, but it's also about being asked to dance. Now that you are embarking on your new career in the same way, it's important that you not simply pathologize your clients, but that you should work with your clients to support them. That goal is not to see them as a problem to be solved or something to be fixed. We all know how dancing works. It's a collective of movements that, when synced together, make the movement look beautiful. In the same way as health professionals, it's important to work within a framework that facilitates change through a collective action, both with you and your clients, instead of simply your individual worldview. People are much more than the stories they tell you, much more than an assessment made. They are complex and fragile, and they are entrusting you to hear their stories, to listen to their stories for a reason. Take time in your career to be an inclusive learner and developing your cultural fluency. Actively find out about others, explore and learn, not just in a cursory way by looking up Wikipedia, but look deeply into yourself as well as the people who you will meet and service. I've had to do quite a bit of learning and developing with respect to my own cultural fluency. So when I moved to Canada with my family almost 7 years ago, I had a very steep learning curve, adjusting to the cultural differences of my newly chosen home. There is much to share about the differences between the two countries, and believe me, I am so happy that I'm here. For today, though I could say so much about the differences between Canada and the US, Today, I will just say, I better see and understand the differences between the two countries. And it's a learning journey that I'm still on. As you learn to work with marginalized communities, those from the LGBTQ, those from Black communities, Indigenous communities, other racialized communities, those with disabilities, you will also need to develop your cultural competence, your cultural fluency, and apply it in ways that can begin to dismantle the systems that consistently oppress groups that have been repeatedly traumatized through systemic discrimination or social exclusion. I know that you all have been groomed in the philosophical Adlerian therapy, a key element which is the interconnectedness of all people. The focus is on pushing past feelings of inferiority and instead acting in ways that benefit society at large. It's recognizing that all of us are connected. As the person with the power and the potential to guide your clients, moving beyond their vulnerabilities to help them feel a greater connection to society is imperative. It's imperative to bring about this type of inclusive approach. Here is some advice I would offer. Many of us say we do not discriminate, but do we really examine the stereotypes and unconscious biases and assumptions we make on a daily basis? Don't rely on those stereotypes or assumptions. Unearth your unconscious biases. We all have them. We're not excluded because of where we come from. Society has helped us to have a script in our minds to say one stereotype for one group versus another. Don't pathologize people, and recognize that origins of intergenerational trauma oftentimes stem from societal structures that harm marginalized communities daily. Recognize that everyone has experienced some form of trauma in their lives. However, the trauma felt by racialized people have multiple layers that may not be immediately seen. Know that some people's trauma is handled by society in a more inclusive way, better than others. At the university I work for, Ryerson, we hold an annual Lunch and Learn series called Soup and Substance. I brought Soup and Substance to the university to allow faculty, staff, and students the opportunity to discuss some of the issues that affect our communities. In those forums, we give voice to people who are often not centered. And at those events, we often hear the spin-off effect of trauma. Trauma not only affects the individual, but also the person's family, as you know, their communities, as well as society. In our Soup and Substance series, we often hear about how oppression affects people. Oppression isn't necessarily something you can see outright. Nonetheless, it's in the air, and it's something that you can make yourself aware of. Some of the major impacts of this forum is to help our community understand that there is a difference between equity and equality. Yes, we want equality for everyone. Equality of engagement, equality of opportunities, equality in the premium way. But in order for people to be equal, we must address things from an equitable place. Equity enables us to recognize that historically we need to build in ways to lessen the gap that continues to permeate as a result of societal barriers. This forum has also enabled us to review how we practice, to review our policies, to review our assumptions about community. One example of that is by doing a land acknowledgement, as was done here this morning. A land acknowledgement for some people would feel as though, why don't those indigenous people just get over it? But there is no getting over it, because it is about a present, a very current trauma and situation and relationship between settlers and indigenous peoples. Or looking at the differences between how men and how women are treated within the workplace. Those are various ways we bring to this conversation and highlight these differences so that things can truly be equitable and equal. Giving thought to how your clients deal with their often multiple oppressions, whether it be gender identity or expression, race, or otherwise, may inform how they speak with you and how then you support them. So in closing, today I am so excited for all of you starting your very new journey. After years of hard work, study, supervision, discipline, papers, and more papers, you are leaving Adler to embark on a whole new profession. So I encourage you to remember this idea of cultural fluency. Remember to practice it as a way of understanding our diverse populations and as a way to be more inclusive in your profession. While I was somewhat stressed before teaching that multicultural counseling course, what I didn't tell you was that I ended up loving it. And both myself and my graduate students learned a great deal. I think the secret to our success was that we all stayed open to hearing new ideas, such as Dr. Darrell Wing Sue and my ability to blend his ideas with my own. I was willing to bring inclusion to my teaching. Challenge breeds new understandings and rewards, along with many opportunities to dance through it. Once you choose to be intentional, or should I say intentionally inclusive, you will learn to love the dance. Changing the system to create the type of world we all wish to live in. I wish you lots of fun, dances, and rewards in the next phase of your career. Cheers and best wishes.